Hello, everyone, and thanks so much for being with us today. I'm Eric Ham, and we're live in the nation's capital of Washington, D.C. And today we've got feuds, gators, and the call of duty. Stay with us as we break it all down, but first, here's a look at the latest headlines. Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian approves a law which will suspend cooperation with the global nuclear watchdog, the IAEA, following the recent 12-day war with Israel and the United States. The 14th Dalai Lama assures Tibetan Buddhists his office will exclusively name his successor, denouncing China's claim to approve the next spiritual leader. Australian airline Qantas hit by a major cyber attack as hackers infiltrate the system holding sensitive data of 6 million customers, raising identity theft fears. CBS's parent company Paramount agrees to pay $16 million to settle Donald Trump's lawsuit over a 2024 interview with then Vice President Kamala Harris. The political feud between Zohran Mamdani and Donald Trump is reaching new heights as both continue to trade sharp elbows ahead of the New York City mayoral election. Mamdani, who is a Democratic Socialist and state assembly member, recently secured the nomination for New York City mayor, defeating former Governor Andrew Cuomo in a major upset. Since then, he's become a prominent target for President Donald Trump, who's unleashed a series of personal and political attacks. In fact, last week, President Trump called him a 100% communist lunatic and claimed his win marked a dangerous shift within the Democratic Party.
They're worried that somebody that, like this communist from New York, someday gets elected. I can't believe that's happening. That's a terrible thing for our country, by the way. He's a communist. We're going to go to a communistic state. That's so bad for New York, but the rest of the country is revolting against it.
President Trump then also mocked Mamdani's appearance, intelligence, and voice, grouping him with left-wing figures like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Senator Chuck Schumer. In a social media post, the president wrote, quote, "We've had radical lefties before, but this is getting a little ridiculous." Tensions intensified when Mamdani pledged to resist ICE raids in New York City, vowing to stop masked agents from deporting immigrants. And asked during a press briefing about Mamdani's remarks, President Trump said, "Well, then we'll have to arrest him."
Soon, Zohran Mamdani, who in his nomination speech said he will defy ICE and will not allow ICE to arrest criminal aliens in New York City. Your message to communist Zohran Mamdani?
Well, then we'll have to arrest him. Look, we don't need a communist in this country, but if we have one, I'm going to be watching over him very carefully on behalf of the nation.
Now, the president did not stop there. He also questioned Mamdani's citizenship, falsely implying that he might be in the country illegally. But in reality, Mamdani was born in Uganda, moved to the United States at age 7, and became a naturalized citizen in 2018.
We're going to be watching that very carefully, and a lot of people are saying he's here illegally. He's, we're going to look at everything, and ideally, he's going to turn out to be much less than a communist. But right now, he's a communist. That's not a socialist.
After the president's remarks, Mamdani quickly hit back on social media, accusing Trump of using intimidation to silence dissent.
The president of the United States just threatened to have me arrested, stripped of my citizenship, put in a detention camp and deported. Not because I have broken any law, but because I will refuse to let ICE terrorize our city. We will not accept this intimidation.
And the Trump administration appears to be doubling down. White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt said that allegations raised by Congressman Andy Ogles against Mamdani should, in fact, be investigated if true.
This Congressman Andy Ogles, he wants the Attorney General Bondi to explore denaturalization proceedings because he thinks Mamdani could have misrepresented or concealed material support for terrorism based on rap lyrics he wrote in 2017. Does President Trump think this is a worthwhile use of the Attorney General's time?
Well, I'll let the president speak to that. I have not seen those claims, but surely if they are true, it's something that should be investigated.
And
Meanwhile, Mamdani continues to draw national attention for his unapologetic stance on immigration, economic justice, and Palestinian rights. His critics accuse him of extremism, while his supporters call him a necessary voice for working class communities and immigrants.
One of the things that we New Jerseyans share with New Yorkers is that we're inspired by the victory by Zoran Mamdani this past week. And it really shows that a positive, energetic campaign can triumph over the decrepit establishment.
As the campaign heats up, the stakes are in fact growing. And with President Trump now hinting at federal investigations and even denaturalization, the battle over New York's future and what kind of leadership it will accept is far from over. And staying in the United States, a Hindu temple in Utah has come under repeated gunfire in what temple officials are calling a hate crime. However, law enforcement agencies are still labeling it as vandalism. Police, in fact, have confirmed the Hindu temple in Utah's Spanish Fork, run by the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, or ISKCON, has been attacked at least 3 times in June. Temple authorities say that a total of 20 to 30 bullets have been fired across these incidents, most of them during nighttime hours when devotees were present inside the premises. Some 20 shell casings have been recovered from the scene, and the bullet holes left in the temple's hand-carved arches, exterior walls, and even pierced a window into the main worship hall, and the damages are estimated to run into the thousands of dollars. The first of these incidents was reported around June 18th when staff noticed a loud noise and smoke emerging from the temple's radio station roof. The Utah County Sheriff's Office is leading the investigation and has called the incidents acts of vandalism. However, temple officials are not mincing words. They call it a hate crime and say the attacks have left the community deeply shaken.
We've gone on well over these last decades with no trouble. Suddenly, this happens. Whether it's religious or political, we don't know, but we believe this was based on hate.
Now, in response, a local security firm has offered 2 weeks of free surveillance while the sheriff's office has stepped up patrols around the site. A $1,000 reward has also been announced for any information that leads to an arrest. And investigators are urging residents to report suspicious activity. Meanwhile, the Indian consulate in San Francisco has condemned the incident, calling it deeply disturbing and offering full support to the temple community.
We strongly condemn the recent firing incident at the ISKCON Sri Sri Radha Krishna Temple in Spanish Fork, Utah. The consulate extends full support to all the devotees and the community and urges the local authorities to take prompt action to bring the perpetrators to justice.
For now, the temple remains open, scarred but standing. Hindu community members say their message remains one of peace, but with eyes now wide open for potential danger. And we now shift our attention to immigration, where yesterday President Donald Trump visited a newly constructed migrant detention center in Florida's Everglades, a remote facility ominously nicknamed Alligator Alcatraz. Situated roughly 37 miles from Miami on the Dade Collier Training and Transition Airport, the facility sits in the heart of a subtropical wetland teeming with alligators, crocodiles, and invasive Burmese pythons. President Trump toured the sprawling complex, flanked by security and state officials scanning rows of empty bunk beds enclosed in chain-link enclosures.
It's known as Alligator Alcatraz, which is very appropriate because I looked outside and that's not a place I want to go hiking anytime soon. But very soon this facility will house some of the most menacing migrants, some of the most vicious people on the planet. We're surrounded by miles of treacherous swampland, and the only way out is really deportation.
The complex, which costs around $450 million per year to operate, is designed to hold around 3,000 detainees, with plans to expand its capacity to 5,000. In fact, a second site reportedly for 2,000 more is already being planned near Jacksonville. And the administration claims the surrounding terrain itself adds a natural layer of security. In fact, the Department of Homeland Security even posted images online of alligators wearing ice hats to drive home that point.
People don't have to come here. If they self-deport and go home, they can come back legally. We will let them come back legally.
And there is a lot of self-deportation.
Yes, but if you wait and we bring you to this facility, you don't ever get to come back to America.
This detention center is part of a wider immigration push by the Trump administration, and the Florida Governor Ron DeSantis announced he would deploy 100 National Guard troops to the site. He also said members of the state's National Guard Judge Advocate Corps would be deputized as immigration judges to speed up removals. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, who accompanied President Trump on the tour, said the plan is to hold quick hearings on site and deport individuals immediately if offered. The president said he supported the move and hopes to replicate the model in Republican-run states like Louisiana.
We're working with the Department of Justice to see if we can prosecute them for that, because what they're doing is actively encouraging people to avoid law enforcement activities, operations, and we're going to actually go after them and prosecute them with a partnership of FAM if we can, because what they're doing we believe is illegal.
Now the facility's construction comes as national detention figures hit a record high. Immigration and Customs Enforcement now holds approximately 59,000 people, which is about 140% above its current capacity. The administration says the new Florida site will help relieve overcrowding and restore order to a system they claim was mismanaged under former President Joe Biden.
Inherited from this guy, this incompetent man, and his administration, which wasn't incompetent, it was radical left, lunatic, communist, whatever you want to say. I know most of them. What we inherited should never, ever be forgotten. What they've made us do. This is all because of an open border policy where 25 million people flowed in. From all over the world, from prisons, from all over the world they flowed in.
While Republicans in the Senate pushed through a sweeping new immigration enforcement bill on Tuesday, President Trump emphasized the urgency of passing it before the 4th of July holiday. Meanwhile, the Florida complex has already drawn environmental lawsuits. Two major conservation groups filed a motion last week alleging the project violates federal and state laws. They say it threatens the fragile Everglades ecosystem, which is home to endangered species like the Florida panther.
It's not good for the water, it's not good for the wildlife and the habitats. Why is it here? It totally undermines and undoes a lot of the brilliant restoration work that's been going on and has been so heavily funded through the years, and it shouldn't be here.
But despite the legal hurdles, President Trump dismissed concerns and said the swampland's wildlife will outlast the human species. And now, with the facility set to begin housing detainees as early as this week, the administration appears determined to fast-track its immigration crackdown. And if Florida is in fact the test case, the country may soon see a rise in detention centers designed not just for custody, but to be inescapable. But as President Trump doubles down on border control, the real question looms: how far will this crackdown actually go? And now to 100 gigabytes of hacked emails, and a shadowy group calling itself Robert claims it's ready to drop them. Their target? President Trump's inner circle. Their motive? Well, that's where it gets murkier. Our next report gets you all the details on this new age digital warfare against the United States.
Iran-backed hackers claim they are sitting on a trove of stolen emails from President Trump's 2024 campaign. 100 gigabytes of explosive data which they threaten to release. US officials say this is more than simple theft, suggesting it could be a calculated act of digital warfare by Tehran. The group of hackers calls itself Robert. But make no mistake, this isn't some rogue hacker with a political axe to grind. US officials say it's a front for a coordinated Iranian cyber assault, and the target is none other than President Donald Trump. The group claims to have stolen emails from Trump's senior advisors and campaign operatives. This includes the accounts of White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles, lawyer Lindsay Halligan, Trump advisor Roger Stone, and porn star turned Trump antagonist Stormy Daniels. The threat? A massive leak, and the goal? Internal strife in the United States. The US Cybersecurity Agency says this isn't just a hack. It's a calculated smear campaign aimed to destroy President Trump's reputation. Warning the hacking group Robert, the US declares they will be tracked down and brought to justice. The timing of this cyber threat is not a coincidence. Just days ago, President Trump torched a proposal to ease sanctions on Iran. Trump's rejection came after Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Khamenei played down US-Israeli strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities. In recent days, Trump has fiercely attacked the Iranian regime, accusing Khamenei of escaping an ugly and ignominious death in the strike. Iran's response? Death threats from clerics, scrapped diplomatic talks on the nuclear program, and next on the list, full-on cyber warfare. This isn't Iran's first cyber strike on the United States. In September 2024, the Justice Department charged 3 Iranians linked to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Their mission? A campaign of disinformation and hacks targeting Trump's campaign. The FBI says it's taking the threat seriously. Its director, Kash Patel, has vowed that anyone threatening US national security will be found and prosecuted. But it's not just emails from the members of President Trump's inner circle. Homeland Security warns Iran may target critical US infrastructure, power, water, transport, even defense contractors. Cyber authorities have issued an alert to operators across the nation. Emails, geopolitical battles, and a presidential campaign caught in the crosshairs signal a new front line in the shadow war of this century.
And finally, a bold new chapter in gender equality emerges. Denmark is rewriting the rule book on national service. For the first time ever, 18-year-old women will join men in mandatory military conscription. And this historic decision comes amidst geopolitical rumblings, with Donald Trump threatening to annex Greenland and Russian ambitions possibly spilling beyond Ukraine. Our next report looks at why the army is no longer just a man's world and how young Danish women are now gearing up to answer the call of duty.
In a landmark shift towards gender parity in national defense, Denmark has officially expanded military conscription to include women, marking a historic change in the Nordic countries' approach to national service. The decision comes amid heightened security concerns across Europe and growing pressure on NATO allies to ramp up defense readiness. A move that also follows President Trump's warnings that NATO countries must pay up or lose protection. Starting July 1, 2025, all Danish citizens, regardless of gender, will be required to register for military assessment upon turning 18. Until now, military service for women was entirely voluntary, though female recruits made up nearly a quarter of any WE conscripts in 2024. With the new legislation, women will now enter the same lottery-based system as men after volunteers are recruited.
In the world situation we're in right now, it's necessary to have more conscripts, and I think that women should contribute to that equally as men do. So actually I think it's a positive change, but I do think that a lot of women as well as men that might be forced to get into the military, it hasn't been like that in many years. I think it'll be a change.
The move passed by Denmark's parliament in June 2023 aligns the country more closely with regional neighbors like Sweden and Norway. These countries have already implemented gender-neutral conscription policies. It also reflects Denmark's broader strategy to bolster military strength as the government plans to increase defense spending by approximately over $5 billion over the next 5 years.
Well, it's based on a political decision and a political agreement made by the parties, and obviously it's based on the current security situation in order to get more combat power and have those skills that are needed for either the Army, Navy, Air Force, or even the Special Operations Forces.
The decision also comes after US President Donald Trump in May this year said he would not rule out the idea of annexing Greenland and making it a part of America. Moreover, Denmark's move also comes amidst the possible threat from Russia, which may move beyond Ukrainian borders. Moscow's war has pushed Nordic nations to reevaluate their defense strategies. The law will also significantly increase the length of mandatory service. Currently set at 4 months, conscription will be extended to 11 months by 2026. The Danish armed forces aim to raise the annual number of recruits from about 5,000 to 7,500 by 2033. Presently, Denmark maintains a professional military force of around 9,000 personnel. However, with inclusivity comes logistical adjustments. Military barracks and equipment, long tailored to male recruits, are now undergoing changes to accommodate women.
there are different things that they need to improve, especially in terms of equipment. Right now it's made for men, so perhaps like the rucksacks are like a bit too large and the uniforms are large as well, but I do know that they are working on it at the moment, and I think it's going to be something that they're going to achieve.
The significant policy shift not only enhances Denmark's combat readiness, but also sends a clear message. In the face of modern security threat, national defense is everyone's responsibility.
That's all we have time for today. We certainly thank all of you for tuning in. We look forward to seeing you right back here again tomorrow. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Hello everyone, and thanks so much for being with us today. I'm Eric Hammond. We're live in the nation's capital of Washington, D.C. And today we've got feuds, gators, and